Welcome to Cryptid Cocktail Party. I'm Sarge, and with me, unfortunately, is not Dave. He couldn't make it tonight, but I brought Maynerd instead because he
Hey,
he lives he lives next door, and he's good at this, gooder than I am.
well, I'm good at setting up the stuff, but I think you're better at the talking part.
Well, good for us because I'm going to be doing a lot of talking. I did a lot of research and I got deep into it. Before we get into that, welcome to Cryptid Cocktail Party. This is a show where we share a few drinks, have a few laughs, and take a dive into the unknown. Maynard, how you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. A little bit of the Sunday scaries tonight, as usual, for a Sunday and
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, I know
But
that feeling. I
yeah,
hate Sundays.
but
Uh,
otherwise, it was a nice sunny day, and I can't complain.
yeah. I hate that I gotta get up tomorrow.
Oh yeah, that's the scary part.
It's so annoying. All right. Well, we got a big show, so I'm gonna just jump right in.
Nice. Let's
I'm
go.
not even gonna lube it up. There's gonna be no foreplay. Here we
Ooh,
go. Maynard, how familiar are you with the term gaslighting?
very actually. I think it's kind of an overused saying right now, but
It is.
I'm
It is
familiar with the
overused.
correct usage of it. Yes.
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant analogy to make, and then it got out of hand.
Yeah. Like
Well,
now
for
it just
those of
gets
you
used if you say someone's lying. It's like, oh, whoa, whoa,
exactly, yeah. Yeah.
there's more to it than that.
Yeah. So, gaslighting is a term for the deliberate act of making people question their own reality. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, the most common method is diminishing someone's perception of an event by presenting a counter narrative in which the person's perception is deemed inaccurate or even unreasonable. Gaslighting often involves manipulation. An example would be someone experiencing abuse by a domestic partner, and that domestic partner later denies the abuse ever occurred or even accuses the victim of lying to create drama. The term gaslighting refers to a 1944 American movie called Gaslight, which itself is a remake of a 1940 British film because we can't leave anything well enough alone. And that British film was based on a play written in 1938. The distinction is notable because the 1944 film had a massive budget, which helped add a little bit more detail and to differentiate it from the source material. So, in the play and subsequent films, a husband tries to make his wife think she's crazy in order to hide his criminal behavior. One of the ways he does this is by making her think that she lost something and then later hiding it in her purse so she finds it and feels like she's going crazy because she checked her purse a bunch of times. Another way is by causing the gas powered lamps in their home to flicker when he is not around, because this takes place in the 1800s, the movie. So when he comes home, she tells him about it, and he can just dismiss her experience by saying, well, you're just seeing things. The lamps are fine. So that's kind of the premise. A few notable examples of gaslighting could be some examples. You see media reports of a smaller than usual crowd in an event like I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, like a presidential inauguration. But later, a man in a poorly fitting suit insists the crowd was actually the biggest crowd in history. Or, perhaps a guy loses a competition, like, say, I don't know, an election in 2020 or something, but then insists that he actually won it. Or maybe a guy with an absurdly stupid haircut and poorly executed spray tan says he's a genius, but has the vocabulary of a 7-year-old. These are all great examples of gaslighting. This behavior is not isolated to abusers and known felons with terrible spray tans. During the Soviet era of East Germany, the secret police known as the Stasi had a practice called Zerzung. Hopefully, I pronounced that right. Kind of sounds like what happens if you get like an electrical jolt through your testicles for sexual pleasure.
It sounded legit the way you said it, so
Zerzung, I'm guessing, is how it's said. Where, among other things, they would undermine perceived enemies by literally breaking into their houses in the middle of the night and moving stuff around in order to make them think that they were going crazy. So some examples of the things that they actually did. This is stuff they actually did. Making alarm clocks go off at 5 in the morning instead of 7 in the morning. Or
wow.
moving socks from one dresser drawer to another.
Have you seen the show Barry with Bill Hader?
Yeah.
There's a part in that when he's describing how he could go over to his girlfriend's no, spoiler alert, go over to his girlfriend's friend's house that she doesn't like and slowly add in like a smell
Oh,
of
right, right. I
furniture
remember
and
this
all that
now.
stuff. Yeah, and she just looks at him like, "What?" Just to slowly make her think she's going crazy. That's another fine example if you're a Barry fan.
Absolutely crazy. behavior, but so silly when you think about it.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, obviously, there were other things in play here. They did other stuff, but that was kind of their weird version of harassment. They would also make clicking noises on the phone lines when people were talking about subjects, um, to make it more notable that they were being listened to. Now, what if I told you there was a group of people who believed they were being gaslit and subject to Stasi-like tactics across the United States and the world, in fact, right now?
Like, did they believe this on a daily basis?
Yep.
But are they really?
Oh, yeah. They believe it. They
Oh,
believe it. Buckle
dang.
up, buddy, because today we're going to be talking about gang stalking. Are you familiar with the term?
I've heard the term, yes, and I've you know, and I've when you told me about it, I kind of looked it up, and I'd heard it before, but not to the level of detail I feel like you're about to bestow upon me, though.
Yeah, I really wish I didn't do all this research because this is going to be stuck in my head forever. Now I'm worried that I'm going to come down with it. So, gang
You
stalking, or
become you instantly
I'm
now
just going to
you're
get
in. It's too late.
a case of the gang stalking. So, gang stalking or group stalking is a term referring to the alleged coordinated harassment of a victim known as a targeted individual, or TI. This is done by a large group of perpetrators, often assumed to be employed by the US government, but could also be part of public companies, secret organizations, other national governments, or even in one case that I read about, one particular religious organization.
Mm.
So, targeted individuals, or TIs, have an incredible list of experiences that they claim they are subjected to. Victims claim police harassment, such as police cars turning on their sirens, passing them, and then turning off their sirens. Paid actors performing street theater or elaborately rehearsed interactions that seem normal while they're surveilling the targeted individual. They've also reported certain cars with dealership plates gathering in large groups to control how fast the targeted individual can drive on the highway.
Wow.
Yeah. And helicopter activity over their home and drones. One man even claimed, and this is without a doubt my favorite claim. One man even claimed that someone shit in his bed.
But not him.
Nope, wasn't him. And honestly,
Wow.
the interviewer had almost the same response.
It's like, he's sure?
Are you sure it wasn't you? You didn't shit in your own bed. So someone else did it, and we don't know why. So if you were thinking this is all just mundane activities or maybe a response to a bad night of drinking, um, activities that we might all witness at one time or another, you would be right. And according to targeted individuals, that is the point. So imagine going to the police and suggesting that the poopies that you found in your bed this morning are not your own.
Well, I
Imagine
mean,
trying to, yeah,
yeah, I mean, these days, I mean, you could probably do a DNA test or something, right?
right?
Seriously.
Well,
If
unfortunately,
you're
this,
that much into it, you know?
but unfortunately, this person reported this in 2017.
Okay.
So I'm like, just pay for a DNA test. Like, get one of those. They make the test where you can test your own poop.
Yeah, yeah,
Just find
sure.
out who it belongs to.
Where did this poop come from?
Yeah, exactly. Whose poop? Imagine you're trying to explain that traffic on the highway was actually orchestrated specifically to fuck with you. How do you convey that people seemingly going about their daily activities are actually executing an intricately staged tableau in order to convince you that they are in fact not watching you?
I don't know. But Boston traffic, I might kind of be on their side.
It is a form of abuse. I will agree with that. So it could be very easy to dismiss these claims as crazy. While not a DSM recognized mental illness diagnosis by itself, a number of mental illnesses and disorders are linked to targeted individuals. In 2015, a research paper on the phenomenon, and the only academic paper available on the subject at the moment, called Complaints of Group Stalking, parentheses, Gang Stalking, an exploratory study of the nature of the impact on complainants, which is one hell of a title. It's a real
Yeah.
zinger. Published in the Journal of Forensic Psychiatry and Psychology, doctors Lorraine Sheridan and David James conducted a blind interview of 1,040 self-identified victims of stalking. Of those interviewed, 128 of the self-identified victims purported to be victims of gang stalking. Of this group, Sheridan and James concluded that 100% were exhibiting signs of delusional thinking based on 3 criteria. The first one is the sheer improbability of the behaviors they were reporting, such as large-scale coordination of multiple surveillance agencies, civilian actors, and media organizations. Then we have the impossibility of some behaviors. So those would include reports of voice-to-skull technology, mind control, and witchcraft.
Oh.
And finally, impossible and bizarre, such as the family dog being replaced with an exact double, but the double has a foul temper, or remote enlargement of bodily organs.
Yikes.
Yeah. I mean, I feel for these people, but that's a tough one. That's really difficult to.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
just you wonder if it's. I mean, you talk about the family dog. Like, what if the dog just
Was just having a bad day, right?
What if the dog got old and started to, and I'm not making fun of this. I'm serious. I'm saying like dog dementia or something, and the dog
Yeah,
just doesn't act like it used to because it's older and it's
exactly.
crotchety and
Any
or
number of
bitey and
factors could have
all those
contributed. Maybe the
things.
dog's sick.
Right.
So in comparison, only a little more than 10% of the traditional stalking victims were deemed to be suffering from some kind of delusion. So that's like, it was like 900 people, so only was like 117. So a little more than 10%.
All right.
And the way the study was done is they kind of opened up a website and had people report into it whatever they experienced, whatever their experiences were, from a list of experiences. And so that's kind of how they figured out who, was gang stalking and who wasn't. There was a bunch of other differences too that I'll get into here in a minute. But in addition, these alleged targeted individuals often suffered from depression, mistrust, anxiety, and aggression more than the respondents who were victims of the more traditionally understood instances of stalking.
Okay. No, that kind of makes sense.
Women actually, surprisingly, suffered largely far more than males when it came to gang stalking.
Okay.
So women, they made up 75% of the 128. It's a
Uh-huh.
pretty stark contrast. So I watched a few documentaries and videos on gang stalking available on YouTube, and a number of targeted individuals reported diagnoses of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And they were diagnosed with this either before or during their ordeal. So I would recommend 2 videos made by Vice and one made by Dr. Todd Grande. If you just go into YouTube, type in gang stalking, these are the ones that I would recommend watching because they're really fascinating.
All right.
Now, there are a number of treatments available for people who suffer from these symptoms. An article on gang stalking by MIT's Technology Review titled, "Am I Going Crazy or Am I Being Stalked? Inside the Disturbing Online World of Gang Stalking." Author Amelia Tate cites former targeted individuals reporting total relief from gang stalking symptoms after being given therapeutic treatments, including psychiatric drugs. Unfortunately, this is where the true tragedy of being a targeted individual unfolds. Targeted individuals insist that they are not suffering from mental illness, thus making it practically impossible for them to get the treatment that they could benefit from.
Yeah. No, that sounds like the worst case of it.
Yeah. Now, this denial of the need for treatment has alienated targeted individuals from their friends and family, which would make sense, right?
Right.
You're trying to get somebody help, you know that they're saying things that don't sound right, things that are delusional, and they're aggressive and they're pushing back on you. So you have to push them away. One targeted individual identified only as Jenny became so hostile to her brother and his son that he had to take out a restraining order on her.
Jesus.
But without treatment and trusted people in their lives, targeted individuals find comfort and community in the worst possible place: social media.
Oh God. Yeah. We
Yeah, it's
didn't
bad.
even talk about that yet.
No, man, it gets real bad. So groups of targeted individuals are congregating across multiple platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit. Here, alleged victims share stories and encouragement. However, these communities have a host of problems all their own. One Facebook group has 22,000 users, which goes a long way to convince an increasingly isolated person that they're not alone. These groups often come together to dissuade members from seeking treatment. Worst of all, members of these groups regularly encourage other members to confront those that are targeting them.
And how is that done?
they literally go up and they start yelling at him. They threaten him. One guy, he was an interesting case. So he was reporting an instance of cause stalking, which is an offshoot of gang stalking, where he was being gang stalked for his political views.
Uh-huh.
He was just a very active person in the gay community, and he had assumed he was the guy mentioned who believed he was being targeted by a religious organization. So this gentleman, he was in the traffic situation that I talked about, and he was pepper spraying and spray painting cars on the highway.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, a little out of control. Another thing that they were telling him to do, this sometimes resulted in police officers being followed by targeted individuals. Might not end well. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
no, for
chasing
sure.
cops around and stuff. Probably not going to go well for you. Social media is not the only place where targeted individuals find strength. Some are also prolific on video sharing sites like YouTube. One user's vlog showed dust on his car and claimed it was nanotechnology employed to track his movements. Another dedicates his channel to finding hidden clues that reveal our reptilian overlords via screenshot of news segments and action scenes from films like The Matrix. So what he was doing is he was watching video scenes of The Matrix, and then, you're watching, what is it, like 20 frames per second for
What's it?
something on YouTube, like a video? Most
Just
of the
30.
time, like, yeah.
30.
So he was catching where the frames were blurring movement,
Uh-huh.
and then insisting that they were transforming into like reptilians, when really it was just the frames not catching up.
This
And so there was blur.
is this how we kind of arrived at this conspiracy theory type conspiracy theory-esque I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but how that's more prevalent in kind of today's
Yeah.
society.
Yeah.
Everything's all conspiracy theories.
Well, that's because information is more readily available.
Right.
So there's more ideas out there. You get some 20-year-old kid who thinks they might be experiencing, they're a little paranoid. They might be experiencing something. Let's say, they're walking through school and a kid bumps into them and doesn't say anything. Or, maybe they trip over their shoelace, but they didn't notice that their shoe was untied. They might start thinking, they might have delusions that somebody deliberately untied their shoe and that kid bumped into them on purpose to
Yeah.
mess with them. Before, you might just kind of ruminate for a little while and then be like, you know what, no, I'm probably wrong. But now you can go online and type in these kinds of symptoms, and you've got a community across platforms that is there to support and encourage you. And tell you not to believe what other people are telling you, and that you are being gang stalked.
Yikes.
One of the Vice documentaries, there was a gentleman who believed that he had been magnetized. And so he would take a magnet and stick it to his skin. And because skin can sometimes hold a little moisture when it's warmer out, the magnet stuck to him. The reporter took the magnet and stuck it to his own skin. And instead of the man starting to question his theory that he was magnetized, he started to believe that the reporter was also a targeted individual.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So the internet's effect on people suffering from persecutory delusional ideations is like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Yeah.
One mental health professional explained that delusions, as defined, are thoughts that are outside of social norms. So he went on to ask, how can you convince someone that they're suffering from delusions when they're part of a community that's 22,000 people strong and they all held the same or similar beliefs?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, how do you tell somebody that what they're doing is not right when everyone else is telling them that they are right? So you're like one person fighting against this giant crowd. And this community has become so insular and cult-like. One solid example of this is a shared language adopted by targeted individuals. Some examples of their exclusive vocabulary include voice-to-skull technology. That's when someone's voice is implanted directly in your skull so you can hear them talking in your head.
Okay.
Energy weapons. No definition there. Electromagnetic radiation. Apparently, this is directional radiation. So it's like aimed at you, but only you specifically. And then microwave technology. Again, not a ton of follow-up as to what that really means. What I'm finding is that a lot of these things like energy weapons, electromagnetic radiation, and microwave technology, they're just reasons applied to random symptoms like nausea and stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of people who, the call it the tinfoil hat crowd who
Yes.
believe all this sort of stuff who may not necessarily be targeted individuals.
I mean, it's kind
And
of funny that you mentioned tinfoil because in the Vice documentary that they did in England, the woman pulled out tinfoil, made a joke about tinfoil hats, and then said that it does help her temporarily, but it's not a long-term solution. It's really sad. I mean,
yeah,
it's funny, but it's also, it's also a little sad. Like this poor person is wearing a tinfoil hat because they believe they're being targeted by stuff when really it could just be it could be anything.
yeah,
Um, some of the other afflictions attributed to these folks are nausea, hearing voices, hearing messages communicated through the television and the radio, sometimes hearing horn honks after certain words are said in the radio, and they believe that that is highlighting that word in the radio is important. Becoming magnetized, as I mentioned, and hearing clicks on the phone line, which coincide with certain topics being mentioned in instances of street theater, to name a few. So these are just a few symptoms. And the sufferers of this phenomenon are clearly unprepared and unwilling to understand the situation. I certainly can't judge them or their perception of reality, but I can and will judge the fuck out of assholes who kind of yes and the situation for their own benefit,
yeah.
such as perennial shit whistle Alex Jones. He's on a number of occasions signaled his support for this community in his various rantings. Another less conspicuous dickhole fed into this delusion by way of anonymous shit posting. This steaming pile of nonsense was a post titled Confessions of a Gang Stalker. Just as the title suggests, some fucking nitwit gleefully described how he goes about gang stalking people, which only reassures the already rampant confirmation bias in this space.
Yeah, and of course, there's
Yeah.
for everyone, there's probably more than just him too.
Yeah, and it's some 4chan nerd who's never left his house, and
Yep.
he's just like, oh man, I'm totally gonna go viral with this.
Yeah, and he's just writing gang stalker fiction.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's just fan fiction. Um, other charlatans inadvertently feed the flames when they promote bullshit like vaccine denial, chemtrails, the dangers of fluoride in the water supply, reptilians, and of course, 5G. So once you're willing to believe that someone else shit in your bed, it's not a far leap to believe that your cell phone caused COVID.
Yeah, no, that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah. So it might be easy to dismiss gang stalking as a sad yet quirky corner of the conspiracy theory community. However, the darkness doesn't stop at the alienation, delusion, and shouting at cops. A small portion of targeted individuals have taken far more drastic action. Jenny, who I mentioned before, did seek and receive treatment. So for about 6 years, she actually turned her life around and even became a board member for the National Organization for Women, while also working for the National Association of Mental Illness. Sadly, her recovery did not last, and she took her own life in 2017.
Huh.
Others chose to attack those who they perceived were targeting them. In 2013, Aaron Alexis killed 12 people in the Washington Navy Yard and wounded another 3. He had written messages consistent with gang stalking vocabulary on the butt of a shotgun. Myron May, a Texas Tech educated lawyer, wounded 3 people in a university library because he was being targeted by supposed energy weapons. And then Gavin Long ambushed and killed 3 police officers in response to the Alton Brown shooting, but Long also identified as a targeted individual. So, I know this is all depressing, but it's not all bad. I saved the good news for the end.
Okay,
So
all
while
right.
there's little we can do to address the issue caused by the prevalence of gang stalking, there is hope. There's a growing community of people who have sought and received effective treatment for gang stalking. These people are regularly posting about their recovery in gang stalking groups on Reddit, Facebook, and Twitter. While many members publicly deride their effort as yet another form of harassment by the various establishment boogeymen, privately, those in recovery are receiving private messages from TIs requesting resources. Now, we can help in these efforts as well by simply calling out misinformation when we see it. If enough of us call bullshit on posts from chuckle fucks like Elon Musk and RFK Jr., maybe one day a TI will discover a tightly coiled dookie in his bed and seek the medical attention he so desperately needs.
Yeah.
That's gang stalking. What do you
Wow.
think?
I think There's a lot of that stuff in there that I never would have associated with gang stalking that
Yeah.
you'd see kind of in the real world every day. So I
I mean, that's what's so insidious about it. It's literally just regular shit that happens to all of us, but they're seeing it as a symbol or a symptom of a larger problem. There was so much in the documentaries that I watched, and in the paper that I read, that MIT article was fascinating. One of the things I also found encouraging is when I did a Google search for gang stalking, none of those forums showed up. It
huh.
was all articles and commentaries and videos on what it is and why it's bad. So, I
So
mean, that's a bit of a relief.
you didn't visit any of the Reddit communities?
No, I didn't, and they actually really discourage people from going into those communities unless you're somebody who's suffered from gang stalking and kind of found your way out.
Yeah.
Because they really do believe that it's kind of a contagious thing. So if you are already a paranoid person, you're only going to become more paranoid by going into uh, a
Right.
community where everyone else is just as paranoid as you are.
Yeah, and you're sitting there just going down the rabbit hole and reading everybody's stories and going, "Oh my god, maybe that's happening. Maybe that's what's happening to me.
Exactly.
Maybe
That's
that's why that guy
exactly it.
flipped me off today." You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yikes.
So, yeah, I mean, I actually one of the things that I read about that I didn't touch on too much, I talked about surgical implants.
Yeah.
Some of these folks believe that they have surgical implants. Um, I was in our local grocery store, you know the one.
Yep.
And while I was in the grocery store, there was a woman. This was a couple years ago. There was a woman who had plastic bags on her feet. This was pre-COVID, like 2019, and she was wearing rubber gloves. And other than that, she seemed completely normal. Like, I didn't notice the plastic bags on her feet. And a lot of people, when they go grocery shopping, they wear rubber gloves because they're just weird about germs. And that's fine. A lot of
Sure.
people are uncomfortable with germs. But as she's standing there, she starts moving her feet. And then I hear the crinkling of the plastic bags. And I just kind of glanced downward because I thought maybe she was stepping on one. And she's, wearing them on her feet. And she apologized to me immediately and then said it was the nanotechnology. She's like,
Oh,
"It's the nanotechnology." And I was like, "Oh." I was polite, I didn't, but I could tell something was wrong. Now, I didn't apply that to gang stalking because I just wasn't, you know, well-versed on it at the time. I'd heard of it, but I didn't know much about it. Um, but yeah, I mean, think of how many homeless people, because you can't maintain a job when you have an illness like this.
right.
And so think of how many homeless people are probably only homeless because they suffer from these delusions, and maybe they're spending the only money they have on a cell phone so they can keep in touch with that one community that's keeping them going. Because one thing I will say about the gang stalking community, as bad as the sort of group think around it is, these folks are helping each other at least avoid taking their own lives. They're really encouraging people not to do that, and there's a lot of respect shown when someone loses their life. Unfortunately, the anger is not on an untreated illness in a country where 60% of counties don't have any sort of psychological treatment. Instead, the anger is towards the government, but for the wrong reasons.
Are the communities trying to help each other not be violent towards other people too, or
No,
are
that's
they
the
encouraging
downside, is
people
that
to
they're
attack
really encouraging.
their
They're not
okay,
encouraging violence, but they're encouraging aggression. And I mean, that's only going to escalate, you
right.
know? But they do make sure to encourage people not to hurt themselves. It's kind of like a don't give up, don't let the bastards win, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really a mixed bag. I was going into this thinking it was going to be some like crazy wackadoo thing like flat Earth where you can just make fun of everybody, but I was immediately dissuaded from that. In fact, I there was one woman, she was really the one that stood out to me the most and kind of changed my whole approach to this thing. She doesn't tell anyone that she's being gang stalked because she knows it's crazy,
Oh,
but she doesn't know that it's because of delusions. She knows it's happening. She just doesn't know how to articulate what's happening to her.
wow.
Now, it's estimated that about 12 to 13% of people suffer from it. Now, the tough part is these are people who are self-reporting. and this could also be people who, could be making it up. Same problem with flat Earth. We have people that just say they believe it because it's funny to them.
Right.
But the study that was done, that very small sample size of 1,040 people, is pretty consistent with the other reporting that they're seeing in other sources.
Yeah.
Which is between 12 and 13%. So there's probably people we know right now in our lives that are suffering from this, but they probably just keep it well hidden because they're not too far along yet.
Yeah. Well, they don't really know what it is, and they're just
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Very
They might know what it is and they might be a part of that community, but they also realize that, you got to have your job.
right.
And these people do claim to have pretty debilitating illnesses. One final thing that I'll leave you with, and then we can move off this unbelievably depressing topic, is there was one guy who had he had an X-ray with a little anomaly on it, and he was convinced that anomaly was something implanted in his body. He says that his dentist did the X-ray, and his dentist said it was also an implant. However, this guy also was sectioned for 2 months for yelling at the sky and digging in a park in London.
Oh.
And he says he wasn't doing that. So it's very hard to kind of take what he's saying as reality.
Right.
And I'll tell you why that's even more of a problem, why his version of reality might be a little out of control. He provided a letter that his doctor had given him, and they read the letter all the way through. And essentially, the doctor said, I'm afraid you might be suffering from mental illness. Of course, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. And then later in the letter, he said, I'm just not convinced that you have an implant in you. And the guy basically did a Lloyd from Dumb and Dumber and was like, so you're saying I can convince you? And that's what he took away from the whole thing. So it was really sad. It's really sad because it's really hard to get them out. But I think the only people who are really going to be effective at getting them out are, very well-trained professionals, but also people who are in the community who have gotten out, have sought treatment, and are living a much better, healthier life. Anyway,
Yeah.
now that horribly depressing thing is out of the way, sorry to drop that nuke on you. If you are experiencing gang stalking, please reach out to a mental health professional. Even if you don't believe me, even if you think that they're on the side of the bad guys, hear them out. Listen to their arguments. Maybe they know what they're talking about.
Yeah. It's the only thing you can do.
All right. Maynard, do you have anything you want to plug?
You can check out the Citizen's Guide to the Supernormal podcast. Hope to have some
we
new
just released an
back.
episode last month.
Yeah, and it's 2025. I'm sure there'll be some more fun stuff to talk about over there.
We are looking to pump out some shenanigans for sure.
Yes.
Especially now that I have this gorgeous microphone.
Yes.
I am ready. And it will plug into our soundboard, which will be really helpful because my other microphone was just USB-C.
Wow. I mean, look at this. 2025.
Look at us. We're moving up in the world. I'm portable now. I'm ready to go.
I have a feeling this year is going to generate a whole bunch of weird stuff to talk about.
Oh, we'll have plenty to talk about. All right. So if you like the show, if you like us, Google Cryptid Cocktail Party. You can find us on Instagram, on Blue Sky. We have a Twitter, but I mean, everyone's given up on that by now. You can also find my link to all my stuff through the Cryptid Cocktail Party Instagram. And if you like coloring books, I made one. It was kind of a thing I only expected to last a couple of months, but then a bunch of morons elected a known felon. So you can just keep buying that coloring book because it's still relevant. That'll be $9.99 at sargessupernormal.com. So there's two S's right next to each other, sargessupernormal.com. Coloring books, $9.99, take you right to the Amazon page. You can do some activities like crossword puzzles, or you can just, roll it up and beat your neighbor with it. I don't care anymore.
It's a picture of me in there. You can color too.
Oh, there are a couple of pictures I made in there, and
it's
he
a
is
good one.
looking snazzy as fuck, I might say. So, Maynard, did you want to say goodbye and I love you to the audience?
Goodbye, and I love you.